from the audience before is when we're going to incorporate peace, world peace into the model, and that'll be in the second session. This session is going to be focused on the principles of individual MBB practice, and then we're going to get into the principles of the collective practice. So, does everybody have their personal net of existence? Everybody have that? Maybe just feel it to see if it's still there, yeah? And when we touch something, we're also being touched by that something. And that being touched by that something has to do with the net of existence and the non-dual aspects of that net. So those of you who are doing the MBB practices, that just being aware of what you hear, what you see, and what you touch. That basically when you see a sunset, you're touched by the sunset. Does that sunset come down and touch you? But you're being touched because that's the way the net functions, the connector loops. And you're being touched in sort of a non-dual way. And non-dual just means that it's beyond the conception of how we perceive and how we think. But just as when you see a sunset, you're touched. When you touch your loved ones, you're being touched by the loved ones. And that is how the net works. If it wasn't for the connector loops of your net of existence, you could never be touched by anything. And human beings would cease to be human beings. But the net is always there. The net is always touching you. And we're going to explore that in depth this afternoon before we get into the MBB practices, because we want to understand how your mind works in relationship to this net of existence. So here's an artist, a Russian expressionist, that has had a very full lifetime and is very significant in the whole 20th century, 21st century. So he says, my secret consists of the fact that over the years, I've retained that skill to liberate myself from destructive secondary sounds so that each form comes alive. He's being touched, simultaneously experience the bliss of hearing the weakest language. Kandinsky knew nothing about the I-system model. However, this is how he expresses the I-system model. What is the destructive secondary sounds? Anybody?
The I-system?
Yes, obviously. The destructive secondary sounds of the I-system. And the experience in the bliss of hearing the weakest language. Where does the weakest language come from? Yeah, the net, from our source. You know, do we really hear our source talking to you? in the Old Testament, where are you? Yeah. God knew where Adam and Eve were, but they weren't hearing the weakest language. Yeah? So, what I'm hopefully sharing is something that you already know, and Kandinsky, he's retained, he is given, but he's developed, he's participated. Each moment, where are you? When we respond by our activities each moment. So, because you're always connected to the net, you intrinsically have both dual and non-dual functioning. That is the bottom line to this segment. What is non-dual? When you see a sunset, when you're out in the mountains, when you're skiing, when you're seeing the baby smile, you're being touched. So basically we have dual functioning of a discriminating mind. We take care of ourselves, we take care of our responsibilities, but at the same time, we need to understand that non-dual functioning is just a manifestation of our having alive sea loops that we're tuning in to this net. And as Kandinsky said, that there's a joy, and what is that joy that Kandinsky is talking about? He's not talking about the joy of hitting the lottery. He's talking about almost the silent joy of natural functioning. That's the joy that Kandinsky was talking about. In every moment, we can have that joy, that connectivity to our wellspring, to the net of existence. And the joy comes when you touch something, you're being touched. Does your ball reach out and touch you? But it touches you, you see? That has to do with what we're talking about, about non-duality. And we'll get into that a lot more because it's a very interesting language to understand the net of existence. So, dual mind functioning we talked about, but it's sort of like a magnet that creates a central force of constantly drawing self-centered thoughts. So part of dual functioning that we all have, that's perfect, but it does create dual mind functioning. And the dualistic mind has certain drawbacks because it dissects the wholeness and interrelationship of you and the universe into discrete and opposing parts. And in a sense, duality is a zero-sum game. Someone wins, someone loses. So you have this spouse, the kids, the job, self-care, bills, that somehow in duality there's, well, I've got to do the job, and then I've got to do this, and I got to do that, and I've got to take care of my mind, I've got to take care of my body, I've got to take care. That basically duality has to do with the separateness, and this figure also conveys non-duality, that basically it's all you, it's all the universe, it's all the sea loops communicating. But what duality does, it's a viewpoint of objectifying the activities of the net, the time and space are unrelated, separate bits of existence. So, duality is part of the net, but it's looking at it with very, very weak C loops. So everything is unrelated. The facts are that everything is unrelated and related simultaneously, which is tough to digest. In physics, they came up with a wave and particle that, it might be here, it might be there. So when you're looking at it, it's here, but if you're not looking at it, it's both places. Yeah? It's pretty tricky. So then this physicist Schrodinger said, okay, well, let's do an experiment of thought. And if it's there, we let some gas out and it kills the cat. And if it's not there, the cat lives. So the question is, simultaneously, how can the cat be alive or dead? And physicists are still struggling with this. Yeah? So, non-duality is a result of the instantaneous activity of the net. The net generates your dual functioning and generates your non-dual functioning, whereby your experiences, you have experiences such that you and a child in Syria are separate and distinct, but simultaneously unified in one. The cat is alive and dead. You cannot, the perceptual thinking mind cannot figure out non-duality. You can't figure out how you're touched when you see a sunset. You can't figure out how you're touched when you touch your baby. So basically, in duality, that one hinders the other. There's either you or me. There's either the United States or Europe. There's either globalism or isolationism. And the dual mind collectively can't solve that problem. Peace is not solvable by duality. In the realm of non-duality, there's no hindrance between the opposites. But the opposites exist, you see. It isn't that they're dissolved. It isn't that the sheep and the wolf are not there. But in the non-duality, that opposites do not hinder one another. So we're going to talk more about this, but we're going to go through more explanations. But I want you to be able to see how this ball that you have in this model allows you to see that there's a rhyme and a reason, and that this model will allow you to deal with your family, deal with self-care, deal with your clients, and deal with the world. So non-duality is not perceivable, but it's there. And it's there because you're touched by what you touch, and you're touched by what you see, and you're touched by that scream of that child in Syria. So let's talk a little more about this. So in non-duality, you and I, inside and out, mind and body, good and bad, have an entirely new relationship and meaning. That's pretty remarkable, isn't it? But it all comes from the model that you've created and that you have in front of you. That somehow, just as those of you who are doing mind-body bridging, when you do the second map, that you're connected to a wellspring of healing, goodness, and wisdom. It isn't that we're doing away with duality, but somehow it fits together, the pieces fit together in a whole different way. Each distinct part doesn't lose itself in undifferentiated whole. So it isn't that you dissolve into the universe, but you, as a separate individual, do not lose your individuality, but you are somehow at the same time connected, just like in physics. The electron, photon can have wave particle characteristics, or it can have a particle. So either it's a particle or a wave. They're very, very, very different. But yet, right here, right now, you're here, but right here and right now, that you're connected. So what does that mean? It means that each thing is necessary and uniquely contributes to the whole. Have you thought about there can be no universe right now, right here, without you? Have you really thought about that? That you're not an incidental particle, an incidental bit of existence. But right here, right now, you cannot exist. If you didn't exist, the universe wouldn't exist at this moment. It shows the intimacy that each one of us has with our source of existence. Do you have any questions or thoughts about that? That's sort of mind-boggling. It's sort of like the cat how can the cat be alive and dead? You know, how can it? It's either alive or dead. Non-duality exists. Experientially, you know it exists. And there is a rhyme and a reason to it. But any thoughts?
So you cover a lot of ground. Your model is very complex. Yeah, it has one simple explanation. The concept of non-duality is to try to explain that which we perceive to be, but it has one source. And so all of us here, we're here right now, so the convergence of all of it together makes a new experience happen. And so when you mentioned the child in Syria, and you asked us to put a point next wherever we saw that, my intuition went to be right what my own point was, because that is what it is. So there's a lot of science, so you're covering a whole bunch of sciences in one, but you're plugging in spirituality too, the essence of being. And I could say that unity is what's going to describe all these things. There's many, but there's only one. And we're all one, and we're all many. It's not easy to conceptualize it, but in Western thinking, it's not going to be easy to describe it. Ancient ways of describing it is much more precise. Unity, multiplexity, divergence, and then convergence. So it's all together. It cannot be broken apart. That's what I think.
Yeah, thank you. There's so many ways of looking at it, and each of us can digest this in our own way. So what are some of the ways you're digesting this, integrating this into your life? Because basically, the model isn't for philosophy. The model is for us to be able to see that there's a particular way of looking at ourselves, humanity, in the universe. So, okay?
Can you explain to me, like I can get the concept, without the existence of the universe, I would not exist. But to reverse that, I can't understand. Can you explain that to me?
Reversing?
When you say, if you don't exist, the universe won't exist, I can't comprehend that. Can you explain that to me?
Yep. So here's a non-dual concept that we can see how sort of the source would exist, but the source, let's look at the net, is to create existence. If there wasn't any existence, the net would exist, but the purpose of the net is to create existence. That basically the creator can't exist without creation. And it isn't that we're not the creator, but we're not insignificant. We are intimately connected to the whole pervading, animating principle. So it's looking at the net, that may be helpful for you, but basically that's a critical point. There can be no universe right now without you. The creator needs existence. I mean, to the creator, I look at it in terms of an activity rather than being a noun. And I think in some of the spiritual traditions that they look at the creator as being an activity and different activities. But if it's, when you stop running, there's no runner. That basically each moment, the bottom line is our activity, and our activity is so critical, so important, that basically in this non-dual way of conceiving with the net of existence, that our activities each moment influence others around us in a dual fashion, but influence the whole net, influence the path of humanity. And it's mind-boggling, but as an individual, that we are connected to this net really gives significance, the proper emphasis to who we are and who your client or patient is, and the same with the group, that we're all individuals, but here, we have a collective free functioning, and the collective free functioning is to together learn about the net and seeing how it can help us and how it can help our clients and how it can help humanity. It was sort of interesting that when we were in Finland, and tonight at supper, Hanna, who's a representative from Finland, is going to talk to those of us who are going to be here this evening. And we did some collective work, and she says, wow, it's like there's a little angel with every group. The little angel is the collective natural functioning of each particular group. So this is, it's the importance of each one of us. When we are able to rest our identity system, we do influence the path of humanity in a non-dual way. I mean, you can see how you're helping your patient is helping humanity, but there's a bigger way because of our connection. This is the power of the model. The I-system model has to do with the net, and has to do with, as someone pointed out earlier, the resistance, the hindrance, the veil. So there is a rhyme and reason to the spiritual system. Okay, there's a rhyme and there's a reason for it, and this is a model to try to see how it works, so we can then be more effective as therapists, family members, church members, members of the United States, members of the world. We'll have a couple, there'll be more slides about about non-duality. So here's William Blake, an English poet. This isn't poetry. It says nothing to do with poetry. Blake was not trying to construct this poem. Blake had nothing to do with this poem. Blake, as a poet, had nothing to do with this poem. There was this grain of sand. You could imagine he's sitting on the beach, and he sees this grain of sand. And he had the experience that he melted into this grain of sand, so there's no Blake, no sand, no universe, but there was all one at this particular moment. This was he was describing a non-dual experience where he experienced a world in a grain of sand. Blake existed as separate, the grain of sand existed, but it was just, he was connected to the net. He didn't lose himself. Blake was right there, but he experienced at that moment, just as most of us had experienced sort of oceanic experiences or experiences of oneness. We're not saying that oneness is where we should go. I'm not saying that at all. Oneness is great. Individuality is great. Multitude is great. But this is a non-dual experience. And then he saw this wildflower. And it was like heaven. His non-dual experience at heaven was in that wildflower. Can you imagine that? That experience. And time, it looked like space, was just in the palm of his hand. He held infinity, that basically he experienced the functioning of this net. And he didn't lose his skills as a human being, as a poet, in eternity, in an hour. He really experienced eternity in the moment, but it didn't rhyme with flower. So again, non-duality coming to life and being represented in a dual fashion. We could say he had a spiritual experience. There's some Zen masters in China. It's cold winter, snowy winter, and they just see the end of winter. They're freezing and cold, and they just see this plum blossom just opening up, and they experience the creation of the universe, that non-dual experience. So Rumi, a great Sufi mystic, says the universe is just ecstatic motion. This didn't necessarily have to do with his twirling. This had to do with his experience of the amazing, amazing activity of the pervading, animating principle. That is just, the universe, ecstatic motion. Here it looks quiet, but he experienced that each moment there was a new creation. Each moment, it wasn't continuous. It was just this motion, the activity to go from the pervading, animating principle from one moment to the other is as spectacular as a Big Bang. To this, he experienced this amazing, amazing activity that we call the activity of the pervading, animating principle. Does anyone know who did these shoes? Well, this was Van Gogh, and many people thought he was psychotic. But when he was painting, he just looked at his shoes, and he saw the whole universe in his shoes. And he took his brush, and each motion, each brush stroke was the universe. You see, each moment, each brush stroke was the universe. And there was no shoes, there was no Van Gogh as separate items, but somehow they came together in this activity of painting his shoes. And these paintings are sought after for $250 million because it resonates with the net. It resonates with the harmony and balance, that it's sort of eternal in a way. If it didn't resonate with the net, if it wasn't a manifestation of the net, it would just be another work of art. Spinoza, eternity cannot be explained by duration. You don't get to eternity by living longer. You can't get to infinity by traveling somewhere. So what does Spinoza mean? Where are you going to find eternity? That if you look at time, You can look at it as sort of a linear, time marches on, but then there's a vertical component right now. And this vertical component is what encompasses eternity, that it's that non-dual experience, that right now, you see. There's eternity and there's right now, but what we're talking about is what Spinoza experienced, that eternity is in this magnificent now, which each one of us have. Okay, so let's go back to some questions about non-duality, about any of the slides. What thoughts, what does this model do for you? What doesn't it do for you? What are your questions? What are your thoughts? So let's open this up for a discussion.
I have a question right here.
I was just wondering, this idea of non-duality have to do with the phenomenologist's idea of non-linear time or circular time?
The religious idea of
The phenomenologist's idea, like existentialism, the
Yeah.
idea of non-linear time or circular time?
well, in the model works with dual and non-dual functioning. Our mind works with dual and non-dual functioning. I think the existentialists have sort of a partial understanding of this, just as Van Gogh didn't understand this particular model, but this experience that he had. So I think what is more important as to what we make of it. And this morning when we all came in, we all had our thoughts about how things are, a model of the mind, a model of society, our religion, spirituality. So what does this do for us? Does this support? Does this conflict? Does this befuddle? What does this do for therapeutic model? That's basically what we're doing is not looking inside the black box. We're sort of dissolving the box in the sense that we're not paying attention to our cognition or our behavior, that we're just looking at a meta level of this net and the eye system in a way that our first book that Carol and I wrote, Bridging the Eye System, had a subtitle, I think you all have that, of Unifying Spirituality and Behavior. And that book didn't include any of our therapeutic experiences over the years or our research, and it just sprouted some ideas. But the idea of this model is, as some folks said, it's sort of unifying, sociology. It's allowing us as social workers, and Derek will be talking about this tomorrow, that the individual and the environment, what is the real mission of this? The real mission is to look at how are we affecting humanity, how we're dealing with racism, how we're dealing with terrorism, how we're dealing with poverty, how we're dealing with injustice. So, just as person in the environment is sort of a model, this is another model that juxtaposes so well, but goes a little bit deeper into existence. It goes, why is a little grain of sand. Each moment it just works so hard to be a grain of sand. You see, that just like giving birth to a baby. Even a grain of sand has to work hard to be a grain of sand each moment. You see. What does that have to do with the pollution in our environment? What does it have to do with the way people treat each other? Well, this model sort of gives some idea about how things are connected. So the whole point of this presentation today is to see what difference it makes to you. What impact does this have? If it doesn't have any impact on you, then it's useless. The model is to benefit you and civilization.
So, Stan, I have a metaphor. This is what it means to me. It's bringing significance, importance to really every moment, like right now, what I'm saying, what I'm doing. I work with Nikki. I've got this metaphor of an ocean. The ocean needs its water droplets. It can't be an ocean without them, and the water droplets have to have the ocean. And if the water droplets retreated into their own self and turned against the water droplet next to it, and if all the water droplets did that, there would be no ocean. So it's very important that every water droplet, or most of the water droplets, work together.
Yeah.
So, that's important. Every moment.
Every moment.
Even if it's just two people.
Every moment is important.
Existence.
And there'd be no ocean without the droplets. Do you know, talking about the ocean, I like the ocean. Carol and I try to live as close to the ocean as possible. But do you know why the ocean is great? Have you ever thought why the ocean is great? Think about, why is the ocean great? Because it does not refuse water. It does not refuse water. That the ocean has no eye system. And water is great because the nature of water drops is to find its place in the ocean. So we can sort of look at all of us and, hey, lots of us are social workers. And we say, well, I just do therapy. But there's more to being a social worker than therapy. There's more to being a psychologist than therapy. And being a physician that the Hippocratic oath is to do no harm. But right now in medicine we're concerned with not only individuals but populations. So when you treat an individual, you need to be aware of the populations. How much money is this procedure costing? What is this going to do? I mean, all those issues are issues I will talk about in the next collective session as to how this helps us understand all the different aspects, from the individual to the government to the bureaucrats to the world. But how does this affect each one of us? Is there, what is the effect of this model?
So as a clinical therapist, I am privileged to serve U.S. veterans that have complex co-occurring disorders, chronic PTSD, not just the trauma, but the chronic PTSD. And they have anxiety, fears, doubts, avoidance, all the symptomology that comes from PTSD, and in addition to toxic shame, guilt, grief and loss, etc., etc. So how this helps me is it helps me to conceptualize the biopsychosocial model and unify it in a way, because when I saw the Van Gogh painting, the boots, that's what it reminded me of. USA veterans that has, gone above and beyond, right? And some of them, when they were abused as children, in addition to the PTSD from serving or from any other sources, what they are looking for, from my perspective, my one-on-one on it, is they want to be free themselves. They went and free some people or help or whatever, but they find themselves with this overactive identity system that is it's restless. Mm-hmm. And it manifests in many, many ways. Mm-hmm. So essentially what they want is some peace and quietness. So these voices and images and memories and floats of many different things going on. When by the way, I used your workbook for PTSD, and initially they struggle with focus and concentration, etc. So I start with them at the very foundational level of breathing, awareness, mindfulness, etc. But really where this is really profound is that they are a great part of a big whole, all of us one. And when they learn to love themselves and to accept themselves and to be okay with themselves, that's when the freedom begins to happen. They start breaking through the layers of anxiety, depression, guilt, toxic shame, etc., etc. And that freedom, you can actually sense it coming out.
Wow.
So it helps me to serve them better.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it's helping me.
Thank you. Yeah, that it isn't that we need to try to tune into the net or be more compassionate or be more empathetic. Basically, the power of positive thinking is zero. It's like a fish in the water trying to swim around so it'll be more wet. Basically, that compassion and empathy and caring blossoms from inside of you. That, yes, is very good methods that we're using, but basically if one rests the identity system, that this will absolutely flourish in a non-dual way, in that we don't know when we do a second map what's going to be on it, you see. It's the amazing thing about non-dual functioning. So natural function is not possible without accessing our non-dual nature. So we talk a lot about non-dual because our mind can function dualistically and function non-dualistically, okay? That is the gift that we have. Our mind can function dualistically or non-dualistically, okay? And non-dualistically is encompassing everything. So MBB, individual practice, facilitates our non-dual functioning, okay? Your alliance with your client is absolutely dependent upon your non-dual functioning. So there's no therapeutic alliance without our non-dual functioning. That basically, if your Denny system is active, you're isolating yourself from your loop, that basically you're the therapist, and there's this poor client who I am going to fix, you see. That basically, what is your working alliance? It's just whatever therapeutic interventions you're making. Doesn't make any difference whether psycholytic type of interventions, whether CBT, DBT, XYZ, ACT. Your therapeutic alliance is where you start. It is a real relationship between you and your client. And that is a therapeutic entity. There is a relationship that you're working together for a specific purpose, okay? It isn't to be a good guy, but as to helping the individual improve their functioning and the way they live their lives. So this involves sort of this collective relationship, and you have this sense that the working alliance is going well. If there's a lot of resistance, there's a lot of struggle, what is it, you see? If our eye system is resting in the therapeutic process, then that is the goal, because then our therapeutic interventions are then optimized, okay? That is not the outcome that you cure a patient. Your identity can be resting, and God forbid your patient commits suicide, It isn't, natural functioning isn't, what happens is determined much higher up than your pay level, okay? There's this net. So if you think you're so important that you can prevent your patient harming yourself, it's conceivable you're stuck in a dualistic realm, and your eye system may well be pretty active. So we're not talking about outcomes, we're talking about process. Each moment there's a process. So we're going to talk about individual MBB practice, okay? We haven't gotten into that yet. So that now we're going to talk about it now that we've covered the field of duality and non-duality. So that, for instance, one of the techniques we use is awareness, knowing, and doing. So when the patient is aware of body tension and mind clutter, we teach him to know that his eye system is active. You don't have to explain complicated language what eye system is. When your body tension and mind clutter, That's eye system. That's good enough. And then you do come to your senses practice to lessen the eye system. Dawn tomorrow is going to be talking about the whole mind-body bridging, how when a patient is aware of negative thinking, he knows this is his depressor, and he can label thoughts. So basically, that's a nice method, awareness, knowing, and doing. I'm not going to get into this because it's going to be, you'll be able to experience it, you'll be able to do maps tomorrow. So what in the world is a therapeutic action? How come MBB practice works? So all interventions are aimed at changing the counterproductive nature of the eye system and liberating natural functioning. All interventions. So basically that's what MBB therapists do. They rest their identity system and they help the client to access their wellspring of healing, goodness, and wisdom. Oh yeah. Due to the non-dual nature of the net, interventions at any level influence all levels. So it means that when you say hello to your client, that's an intervention. If your eye system is active and you're not with them, but when you say hello, they're there and you're there, and that connection is there. That is a particular intervention. It means that there is no priority of superficial or deep. That all interventions that rest the identity system. Okay? If you have massage, the person feels better, yeah, the rest of the identity system. It affects the mind, it affects the body. That when you do yoga, if you do meditation, if you play sports, if you walk, take care of kids, take out the garbage, they have both a dual and non-dual. I remember when I was in Maine, we dealt with the most difficult to treat patient. And these patients who were admitted were a danger to themselves or others. We took every patient, and as medical director, I was in a sense responsible. So I was very, very interested. For instance, we had a patient that had a diagnosis of chronic schizophrenia. They tried all sorts of medicine, all types of therapy, all types of things, and he stuck. And then one day the nurses come to me and say, hey, John is sort of relating to people. You know, he's doing things he hasn't done before. He seems to be more grounded. So I was particularly interested in how come these changes took place. So I sat with John, and he said, you know, I had a new nursing aide that came on today, and the way he looked at me and the way he sat down gave me hope and optimism that this nursing aide who knew nothing about this model, well, they knew something about the eye system because we're teaching all the staff to see if they can rest their identity system. But that was an intervention. So basically, it matters how you say hello, how you shake hands, And also what matters is that your Denny system is resting. So you don't, you just in giving people educational information, it's not necessarily the educational information. I mean, this is good, yeah, great. But you're doing it with a resting eye system. You're doing it because you want that patient to do better. And that interaction, if you do educational interventions with an active eye system, you're going to have very limited results. You're optimizing your results when you have a resting eye system. Any thoughts? We're getting into how you're going to get your CEUs here.
I'm just really thinking about how this model is so helpful to me in I work with EMDR therapy, and I see people find, that connection and an inner healing resource, and that really comes from like this net. I feel like it gives me some way to conceptualize that, and it's a struggle for people to find that or to connect with that, but I always believe they can, because they're connected, to this system that we're saying has a natural functioning and is in some way like self-healing and regenerating, and it's somehow a huge relief as a therapist. But the belief of their own connection to their self-healing capacity, and that I do that best when I'm doing that for myself. So I'm really enjoying this model. It's very
thank you.
helpful.
Well,
Yeah.
I certainly feel that my time here is worthwhile if we had the influence of even one individual that sort of sees that this model sort of pull things together and enables progress. So thank you. Let's see. So what is the goal? We talked about the therapeutic action. So what is the goal? We're going to have a 20-page description of the goal. Well, there's just 3 diamonds, and these are the central controls. The goal of MBB practice is having the central control function without the adverse influence of the Denny system. Period. It's not nice, simple, direct. We're going to sort of, in a sense, clean up the central control, where the representational world is riddled with eye system storylines and generates all kinds of requirements. So there's stage 1. We're connected to the net all the time, so basically a lot of the time you're natural functioning. Unfortunately, we don't take credit for that. When we're taking out the trash, when we're vacuuming the floor, we don't have a lot of storylines, our bodies relax, we're not trying to be someplace else. Wow. So basically we all have the capacity for natural functioning. That's our gift. We also have the gift of eye system functioning. So basically what we're doing, and we'll get into it, is sort of cleaning up the storylines in the representational world. And it's just, the goal is pretty simple. Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3. So, the stages of MBB practice. This has to do with your personal practice, and those who are certified in MBB do have a robust personal practice that hopefully we continue. So, stage 1 is eye system predominant functioning. Stage 2 is sort of dual natural functioning. In stage 3, we're reaching the essence that we've been gifted with. So those are the simple stages of MBB practice. So let's look at stage 1. The eye system works to convince you that who you think you are is really who you are. We're just a thought picture. We're just something that you can sort of write down on a paragraph or a novel. But as we talked about, that who we are is so expansive, so pure, so ever-changing that the thinking mind can't conceive of it. So our true self is inconceivable because it has these non-dual connections with the source, with the rest of the net, and yet it is manifested by what? The bottom line of MBB practice is action each moment. It's we call free functioning, free of identity system. It's called natural functioning. That's the bottom line. So basically, if you want to find your true self, it's like a fish trying to find how to get wetter. And the self-improvement books, how to improve the self. Well, we should try to look at what the self is before we try to improve it. Are you polishing up your eye system model? Because to find your true self, it's always there. All you have to do is rest your identity system. So it reinforces the notion that there exists a separate, unchanging, and self-sufficient entity called you. That is, you have a built-in, isolated identity system. The second paragraph is absolutely crucial because attempts to alter this fixed identity is viewed as an attack. So basically, we have many clients that feel that shift in the two-part map. They feel that their natural functioning, but then they sort of view this that if they give up their identity system, they're going to go right down the tubes. So it's important to realize that the identity system does protect itself and has plenty brain resources to protect itself. So that's stage 1, that basically if someone doesn't know about MBB, this would be the case. And at the beginning, when you have a client, we must always realize, even though they may be so enthusiastic about the principles, that they're connected to this wellspring of healing, goodness, and wisdom, and they see on that second map when they're bridging that they're going to heal better, that they have more wisdom, that they have more power, that there's still this bottom line. Attempts to alter this identity is viewed as an attack. And that may be one of the reasons why sort of mind-body bridging is relatively in a closet, you see. Because practitioners, part of what they're doing is part of their identity system. Stage 2, dual natural functioning. So as the identity system is rested, as is recognized and rested, dual natural functioning automatically appears. Okay? So with continuing MBB practice, positive changes in life occurs. However, the representational world in the central control is still tainted by the identity system. So they have dual natural functioning, but yet they have not reached, we have not reached the non-dual essence of who we are. And this is because there's still these storylines going on about who I am, who the world is, these clinging to values. There's sort of I know things, whereas a knowing mind has a certain sector of knowing, but a don't know mind isn't ignorant, but a don't know mind has a confidence to be more open, to the whole net. So this is the stage that our clients reach, and this isn't the end stage. Hopefully, they will continue their mind-body practice without the therapist, and this will happen automatically as they continue their practice, that they will then experience what? They will experience non-dual natural functioning. So even with periods of non-dual functioning, even in this stage, there's still what we call an identity grasping. The I system always considers you, or even your true self, a thing capable of ownership, possession, and control. So they may have natural functioning, they may be doing well, but there's still some clutter going on in that central control. Because basically we're always working through the central control. And we know that the central control, that's how we have input, and as human beings, we have our own input to this central control, whereas nature doesn't have this. So we need to purify the influence of the central control. So non-duality is not the key. We don't have to go searching for non-duality any more than the fish has to find a place in the ocean that it's wetter. But the bottom line is how you're able to free up your central control, and the bottom line is mind-body bridging, is how you take care of yourself and your responsibilities, beginning, middle, and end. So we don't glorify the net, we don't glorify non-dual or dual, that we just keep our eye on the present moment, on the business, and we take care of our business. So these are the stages. So basically what we're saying is what we said initially, that we have access to non-dual and dual functioning, but our I system clutters it up, prevents us from experiencing the magic of how the world works, the magic of the net of existence, the magic of the creation of everything. Yeah? So the model, in a sense, is pretty simple. That all we want to do, where we can only intervene, is in the central control. And you have the central control right there. So how you think, how you act, that basically these central controls. And when the eye system is resting, we automatically, all these C connections, all these C loops are active, and we don't even know it in the sense, but somehow we, as Kandinsky was saying, that there's a joy of natural functioning. So let's look at this aspect of choice. Choice is a really, really critical item. So in stage one, the person is unaware of the working of his eye system and believes he has free choice. So when I was in undergraduate school studying physics, I had this sign on my little lamp at my desk, and it says, "Man thinks as he wants to think and acts accordingly." You know, I was totally isolated from the net, and my fixer was active. I was driving myself to be in control of everything. And I'll even tell you a dream that I had that scared the dickens out of me. So I was math, physics, studying it, and then I sort of became interested in spirituality and religion, but I had no interest in medicine, okay? And going into medicine was an accident. We maybe talk about some other time. I had this dream. I was looking about this leap for faith, or leap of faith. I really didn't understand it, but I looked at it as far. That if I leap, I'm going to get the faith. You see, I had it backwards. But I had this dream that I was in the hospital and I was connected to all these tubes that you couldn't imagine. That all these tubes were coming out of everything. And I woke up terrified. And I says, goodbye to spirituality. That basically, that I envisioned at that time that if I would, looking back, rest my identity system, that I would lose control of my faculties. That the only reason why I was on top of my class was because I kept working, I kept driving, I kept thinking, I kept studying, you see. And I thought I had free choice. Okay? So in stage one, the person is understanding and thinks he has free choice, rather than his identity system is driving him. So stage two, the person understands the role of the identity system and now has a real choice of eye system functioning or natural functioning. So we're moving on to an area where, okay, if I rest the identity system, I can then have You know, a choice. I'm making a choice. I'm making a choice to do something. I'm making a choice to come to my senses. I'm making a choice to label my thoughts. Making a choice to recognize my requirements in my everyday life. So we're now looking at, we have a choice of I system functioning and natural functioning, because we've learned about the identity system, even though in stage one, you know, we may be, well, I can choose to buy this or not buy this or do that. Of course. But what's behind a good part of those decisions is the identity system. And yes, even if our identity system is resting, we can choose to buy a new car, we can choose to go out and boogie, we can choose to, you know, so basically there's no value judgments here. So even with a mature MBB practice in stage 3, one cannot mandate natural functioning. So you can't mandate natural functioning. The increase in purity of your representational world in the central control makes the accident of natural functioning more and more likely. So you can't make yourself natural functioning. Natural functioning comes from where? It comes from what this represents. So your natural functioning comes from what this represents. And this is just a model. Sort of interesting, talking about models, I'll sidetrack it for a moment. But Stephen Hawking, he wrote this book about the universe in a nutshell. Okay? So we picture this nutshell, and the universe is inside the nutshell. And then, later on, he comments, he says, I don't know whether the universe is inside the nutshell or outside the nutshell. You see, that basically there isn't any inside and outside. There isn't any good and bad that is tension-ridden. There is this discrimination of all these different things, but in a non-dual way, they're all connected. And when you experience how the net works, it's just like Kandinsky said, it's just, good. You know, it's really nothing special. Natural functioning isn't something special. Natural functioning is just the way everything works, that's all. It isn't special any more than the water is special to the fish. But water and fish are part of existence. You and everyone else here, and everyone in humanity, everything in the natural world, everything in the physical world, the chemical world, it's all the same. I mean, it's just the way it is. So the question is, the bottom line, is it possible that with non-dual naturally functioning, free choice melts away? What do we think about that question?
We have both dual and non-dual functioning, so it can't melt away.
Okay.
It's always there.
You always have free choice. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. More thoughts?
So what I'm thinking is that the more one trends toward non-dual functioning, that one's choice begins to flow in harmony with the environment. And so your choice is a collective choice. So maybe in that sense, individualistic free choice merges with the collective free choice.
Good. Good. Other thoughts?
I can't see that free choice ever goes away, but our need to use it would diminish to where we could ultimately make one choice and then not have to make any more.
Yeah. Good. Other
I can see how instead of choosing this or that, it's choosing both and. That they both relate in some way or another to each other so that it's not either or.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
It kind of seems like there would be an expansion of free will because of your capacity to see what's in front of you would expand.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying free choice sort of expands?
With consciousness, with the ability, as you become aware of like your identity system, you see more options in front of you, you see a bigger picture, so your ability to choose would expand as you see more.
Right, good, good. We have better, more choices, good. Other thoughts about free choice?
So I guess the way that I'm thinking about that is, you know, as non-dual functioning is happening more often, my I system is resting, you know, my choices are often dictated by, you know, what's important to me, you know, the wisdom, the goodness, the healing. So it's almost more like they're just kind of dictated by that instead of dictated by my identity system.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not really sure if that means that my free choice changes, but it's just a lot easier to not second guess my choices or second guess my actions when they're, you know, in service of something bigger than me that's, you know, connected to the net and connected to goodness and wisdom. You know, it just happens a lot easier for me personally.
Yeah, that's really fascinating because when our identity system is resting, we make a decision, dualistically, it's 51-49. But somehow when we're connected to the net, there's a certitude. Even though they're different, there's a certitude about what we're doing. There's a comfort of what we're doing. And it doesn't necessarily depend upon the outcome. That basically natural functioning is determined by all those loops above and beyond us, much higher pay grade. So that aspect of choice is quite interesting, that the quality of what we're doing when we're connected to the net, when our I system is resting, is a whole different quality, that somehow there is this non-dual, that there's me and there's a universe and there's a creator, and somehow that they're all in harmony and in balance at that particular moment. And each moment we're being called again to what we do. More thoughts or comments about free choice?
So just briefly, maybe this was already mentioned, but so then isn't our choice always just to either stay connected to the net or not, ultimately?
Right. Once we rest our identity system, then we get into natural functioning, and then there's dual natural functioning that we choose to do, and then there's sort of non-dual where we sort of maybe embody our net of existence, embody it. And there sort of becomes in non-duality, you become a partnership. This was an earlier question about our source, God, the creator, and creation. That basically, that there's a cooperative effort, but the you who cooperates isn't the you who you think you are. You see, that you cooperate with the creator, but it isn't the you that you think you are. Just as your heart beating each moment is in full cooperation with the creator, was in full cooperation with the net. When we get upstairs into the mind, that the you who's separate and isolated sort of melts away, and there's sort of a mystical, magical, spiritual, religious, that, you know, anyways, I don't know anything about, but, you know, more spiritual folks have been able to elaborate upon that mystical resonance that we have. So when we're talking about free choice, it's who's choosing too. That if it's the you that's really in harmony and balance with the net, that's one thing. And if it's you who we're holding on to for dear life because we don't want to go down the tubes, that's another thing. So thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something, and I noticed at the same time that I am feeling the hindrance of my identity system for me to say this what I want to say. And I just thought about this, that I know that this is possible, and I know it for experience, but I've only experienced it for one day last summer, and that is so remarkable of an experience that I don't know how can I explain it, but anyway, there was this one special day where I really felt this, that there is no choices to be made. There is no choices. I don't have free choice in some sense, even though it sounds somehow crazy when I'm trying to talk about it. I didn't need to make any choices. I think the closest way to try to talk about it is that I was really connected, is not even the right word. I was one with God. So then there is no choices to be made, and that is such a different way of living or experiencing living that I'm still quite astonished by it, and I'm sad that it's not possible more, but I know it's possible, and that is the experience that I don't have to make even these normal choices. I don't have to choose that. Am I going to have lunch, this or that, or am I going to go out now, or am I going to do this or that when there's no choices like that. I'm just one, and then life just evolves.
Wow.
That's the nearest I can I can say.
Wow. You know, that's better than any of our slides, just that experience that I know when we're writing that some people feel that they're just doing God's will. Yeah, that basically, that's what they're doing. And with the MBB practice, these accidents, which Hannah described, which our slides were trying to describe, that all of us, in our own unique way, can have those experiences, and that experience sort of allows us to really experience and express that net, and it results from that diamond that at that time the representational world is purified. That basically, if you look at it, and Carol and I developed this as a spiritual kind of practice, and that whatever we've received, whatever we've gained has just been, we're just a simple vessel. But the more we're able to use this model, the more we're able to not only have these experiences, but these experiences are accidents. In the word of not an automobile accident, but an accident is something that you don't determine. Hannah couldn't make that happen. That happened, if we want to look at net, is when we're able to experience and express that. So it's an interesting thought. Is it possible with non-dual functioning that free choice melts away? It's sort of a non-dual answer. Yes and no at the same time. Is a cat alive or the cat dead? How can it be alive and dead at the same time? Well, we're trying to grasp this mystery of the pervading, animating principle with this particular model. And hopefully that the model is a power that you can use not only individually, but in the next session we're going to be talking about the collective MBB practices. So do we have any more thoughts, more comments about this particular section where we focused on the mind, we focused on a way of looking at that, both non-duality, duality, and we looked at it in terms of the individual MBB practice. Any?
So in exploring your last question, in order to rest the I system, the person must enter into the true self. In order to enter into the true self, the person must stop the I system. It is, I have a couple biases because I'm Hebrew, but when the Most High say, come and I will give you rest, in order to go, you got to stop wherever you're going. To enter into function is to enter into what is natural. Mm-hmm. I cannot be a dog cannot be me. To enter into function, into natural rest is it's like going to sleep at night. You don't have to worry about breathing once you go to sleep because that's natural functioning.
Yep.
Breathing is natural. Water is natural. And so one must stop, but one must also have a desire to go to that which is true. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So,
yeah.
I am that I am.
Yep. I am that I am. Yep.
There's simplicity.
I am that I am. That I am is our activities. That you can't be who you are without the activities. existence can't take place. So if we look at our balls that are spheres, and that word sphere is a sphere of influence. And so just as an individual, our sphere of influence covers all of humanity, from the beginningless beginning to the endless end. And yet each one of these loops with a central control that are loops in our body, the heart is just working, regulating by these feedback systems, while these error correction systems, too much blood, too little blood, too much insulin, too little insulin. And even when we have cancer or disease, we're still optimizing our functioning. What is we have cancer, okay? Where does cancer come from? Well, you can sort of analyze it, the Huntsman Cancer Institute, but it comes from the net, you see. And so we are all optimally functioning, just as there was a cancer patient who had a very strong MBB practice, and she was sort of, the last days her family was around, and she sort of was smiling, and they said, "How come you're smiling?" And she was just close to her last breath, and she says, "I see throughout my whole life, no matter what my trials and tribulations, that I was always connected to my source." And then she laughed and died. The people doing MBB that have cancer, that it optimizes their healing. But basically, natural functioning isn't outcome dependent. In each one of these loops, with the central control, error correction loops. However, the I system does not correct its errors, okay? That every other system tries to optimize it. The goal of the I system is just to keep going and going and going. It doesn't correct itself. It tries to be a perpetual motion machine. That every system you talk about, there's error correction. You see, we'll talk about lots of collective systems. The I system doesn't correct itself. It's an amazing system, but it doesn't take feedback. It doesn't take feedback. Hey, you're destroying your life with drinking. You're losing your relationships. You're losing your kids. You're losing your house. But his reality, cluttered by his identity system, is his reality. He thinks he's optimally functioning. So the identity system is not self-correcting. The depressors and the fixers will never fix a depressor. No matter how much you try to fix yourself, you're going to still experience that you're damaged. And what is damaged self is just a dysfunctional mind-body system. So, why don't we take a break?